Hello and welcome to Just Films and That, a podcast where we discuss films we feel may be underrated, underappreciated, or we just want to talk about them. I'm Josh Hallam, and I'm joined as ever by Alice Oliver. Alice, how are you?
I'm pretty good, thank you, Josh. And yourself?
Yes, I'm very good. I'm very excited. We're joined by a very special guest today. He's a comedian, he's a podcaster, he's a YouTuber, and he's an Arsenal fan. Jim Campbell, welcome to the show. Thanks very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to it. It's a nice opportunity to sit about talking about films, which I would, I'd be doing it anyway. So
there you go. Where do you rank yourself in those? So you got comedian, podcaster, YouTuber, Arsenal fan. Where's the top one?
Unfortunately, because of not even so recently, more global events, I've done 3 stand-up gigs since March. So I'm sort of an involuntarily retired stand-up at the moment. So that has to sadly come quite down the list. I suppose, YouTuber would have to come after that because that's relatively new. Podcaster after that, and then at the top, Arsenal fan, because that is just indelibly stained into my soul, whether I like it or not. And sometimes I do not.
Has that been hard, not being able to do stand-up, like not having the crowds and stuff? I feel like that must be torture.
It is horrible, yeah. It's kind of... like I said, I've done 3 gigs since March, and that was enough to remember why it's such a buzz and why it's such a brilliant thing. And naturally, you just you note down things that you're thinking about that you find funny, and the beauty of stand-up as an art form, and I think it can be an art form, not always, but sometimes, is that you might have an idea for something that day, and that night whether it works or not. And sometimes it doesn't, and it's an avenue closed off that you don't have to think about anymore. And sometimes it does, and you can build a bit out of it. And that's a really exciting and really immediate thing. And it's just, you don't get the same over Zoom. So it's kind of, I have really missed that, actually. Yeah.
Are you building up like a massive bank of material, do you think, for when we sort of start edging out of lockdown?
I'm building up a massive, it's not material yet, if that makes sense, because you've got to kind of construct all of that on a stage, really, to see if it works and see if it flies. Because you can plan a bit that's 5 minutes long, that has a beginning and a middle and an end and toppers and callbacks and all that, but you need that to have a dependable laugh every 10 seconds, and there's no way of knowing whether you have that in the bit you've written without road testing it. So yeah, you can only do so much from home, but it'll be back and it'll be all right.
I'm looking forward to the Jim Campbell 8-hour special, all the stuff I did in lockdown. So we start with a random question. I'll come to you, Jim, second. Alice, I'll come to you first. Is there a hobby you didn't do as a kid that you wish you had done because you kind of don't have time for it now?
I feel like maybe one of the martial arts, like something where you can train your brain and train yourself physically. Like when you get into your 30s and that, and I know it's not that old in the grand scheme of things, but I feel stiff, I feel achy, I feel like just having a bad night's sleep just kind of completely ruins me. And I wonder if I'd kind of got into something that just made me stronger physically as well as stronger mentally, if I'd, be in a more primed for life, I suppose. But it's never too late, is the thing. And I could always start it now, especially with, everything that's going on. People do have a bit more time on their hands. So there's no excuse, really. But yeah, I think one of the martial arts, maybe even just something a bit mellow like Tai Chi, maybe just kind of really to, get that control and that discipline. Why? What was yours, Josh? What do you think yours was?
Yeah, I thought about martial art. I wish I'd done a martial art as well. Like you say, it's never too late. But there is stuff that you have like boundless energy when you're a kid, whereas when you're an adult, if you do have a hobby, there's that thing of if you're thinking it in with you're planning it around a full-time job. There is that thing of, oh God, I've got that tonight though, haven't I? I can't just go home.
I've got to go home and men are going to beat me up to teach me how to beat people up.
I'm going to pay £20 to be beaten up a week. Or I've always wanted to learn a musical instrument, guitar, piano, something like that, other than the recorder, which I didn't get that far with. I wasn't a naturally gifted musician.
But I know you can sing, as you told me once upon a time. I'm still waiting for that gig.
Like an angel. Jim, what about you?
I think, I did play it a little bit, but not to the point where I ever had a proper lesson or anything. But I think piano. I play guitar, but to a level of I'm satisfied with doing this because I can't find it relaxing, and I don't play as much as I used to. But I think piano is a brilliant thing, and I'm tempted to say something like a martial art as well, but I just know that I wouldn't stick to that in the same way. I just know, I think I know my limitations by now. To the point where actually, when I was a kid, I obviously wanted to, you've got unrealistic expectations of firstly what the world is like, and secondly yourself. And I thought like basically having some sort of ninja skill would be really, really useful. Like being able to like flip off of things and like do like amazing high kicks would be, because the world would be like Streets of Rage. So in my head, the way to get good at that was to become good at gymnastics. So I did a single gymnastics lesson thinking that I'd learn how to like bounce around and bounce off of walls and just apply separate martial arts skills to that. And I tried it once and it was hard, so I stopped.
Yeah.
So yeah, piano is in a roundabout way.
So we'll move on to talking about this week's film. Jim, you have picked this one. You've picked Perfume, the story of a murderer. So spoiler warning for that. I should just say we're probably going to just call it Perfume.
Yeah.
Because that's quite a mouthful to call it that all the way through. So it's from 2006. So spoiler warning if you've not seen it. If you haven't seen it, it centers around a young man played by Ben Whishaw, who plays Jean-Baptiste Grenouille, who's abandoned at birth. He's raised sort of in the Paris slums via hard labour and squalor. He's blessed with an incredible sense of smell. So after smelling a young woman, this is when he's a sort of young man, he accidentally smells her and sort of he kills her basically, and then he becomes consumed with this idea of preserving the smell of a person, particularly women, which sends him down, shall we say, a pretty dark and twisted path. And that's all I'm going to say on the plot. So, Jim, I'm quite interested with this one because it's certainly an interesting film to watch. So, why did you pick it, apart from the fact that we asked you to pick a film?
Well, I think obviously it's not the most obscure movie out there. A lot of people listening to this will have seen it, so I do feel a little bit. I'm not sure if it entirely fits the brief, but I just feel like more people should have seen it. I think it's a really, really good movie, and I think what's really interesting about it as well is that it's a really good adaptation of a book that is very, very difficult to adapt, because it's from a novel about the sense of smell, which is a very, very difficult thing to do in a visual medium, obviously. And I think that they nailed it. They did such an incredible job of doing that. And I think what I love about it so much, and what the movie captured from the book as well, is that it reads as if it's hundreds of years old. And the film looks like it's exactly, as if it's adapted from something that's hundreds of years old. And I think they effectively, Patrick Suskind, when he wrote this book, he created a kind of new and effectively kind of authentic folk horror tale that is as kind of good as any sort of grim tale. Like it's completely unique. It's not really. I'm sure he had his influences, but there's nothing it's obviously drawn from. It's almost like a forgotten grim tale. This guy that can effectively perform kind of these superhuman feats where no one knows how he's doing it. And I think that's what's so frightening about Grenouille. I'm going to pronounce that wrong many times over this podcast.
So are we.
Yeah, is that he can track his victims and effectively steal their essence in a way, not just where he has this huge advantage over them, but that where they would never even think to begin to understand how he's doing it. And that powerlessness is what I find makes him such a sort of frightening character.
Have you read the book then? I'm guessing you have.
I have read the book, yeah.
Is it a lot different, or?
No, it's a very, very faithful adaptation. Obviously, there are certain bits that have had to have been cut out for brevity, but generally speaking, it's really high up there with faithful adaptations. I always think the ultimate kind of faithful adaptation is probably Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which is almost like word for word the same in a way that's actually quite astounding, really. But this is kind of up there from my memory, at least. Obviously, I read the book a fair while ago, but yeah, again, cannot recommend both enough. And I'm just kind of, like I said, I'm surprised it isn't better known, because I suppose it's a thriller in a way, and it's strange in that it's from the perspective of the murderer, but they resist the idea of making him into a sort of anti-hero.
Mm-hmm.
You are fully aware of how horrible he is the whole way through it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's a really, like you say, he's got this amazing. He's almost like this silent apex predator type who is equally menacing and powerful, but also vulnerable and quite. He's not a big, muscly guy. You don't get the impression he's, this huge hulk of a man. But at the same time, it's not about that. It's about the ability he has. And it's interesting you talk about the book. So I haven't read the book, but I sort of obviously read about the book in preparation for this, and it struck me as a bit of like an American Psycho level unenviable task of adapting this into a film.
Yes,
like I can imagine it was quite a difficult thing. And like you say, it feels like a classic novel, but the book is from the 80s.
Yeah,
it's really strange.
I had to keep reminding myself when I was reading it that it wasn't hundreds of years old, because it's despite the fact it's very readable and it's very sort of quick read, but so Crime and Punishment is surprisingly like breezy and modern and readable, and it's kind of got a similar kind of feel in that sense, and I suppose that's what tricked my brain into thinking it was older than it is. There is a scene in the movie where he goes into a cave. And he's sort of almost because he's got he's isolated, so he's not surrounded by so many smells. He can almost go through the memory bank of his own smells, and I'm so glad they kept that in the movie because it's such a strange part of the book and such a strange just concept in general. And it would be a very, very easy thing to just kind of cut out again for brevity, but they've been very, very faithful to what makes the book unique. And I think that's how this movie succeeds. It's in keeping the idiosyncrasies of the book, because his motivations as a villain are entirely his own. They're entirely unique to this character. There's no one alive who has ever thought in that way, and yet it seems completely believable and monstrous.
Yeah, but also at the same time, he has a strange logic for it as well, which is what I think is really interesting. So, Alice, have you seen this before we watched this?
I hadn't seen it and I hadn't heard of it. So I think it's interesting, Jim, that you think that maybe that it was maybe too seen to be mentioned on this podcast. But no, I was going in totally blind, which I always enjoy. I'd got no prior knowledge of the story of the characters or anything. And I do want to talk about the opening scene because, my goodness, what a way to start a film. One of the most dramatic opening scenes I think I've ever witnessed. So they're dragging him through, aren't they? The crowds are sort of screaming and chanting for his demise. Everybody looks disgusting. Like, you get such a feel of kind of the rancid atmosphere that is being projected there. And I feel like they did a good job of sort of carrying that on throughout. Just after that first opening sequence, and you get his mum giving birth to him in the fish markets, and that is just it's so horrific and dark, but you can't look away. And I think it does such a good job of designing that world and just letting you know this is a horrible place where people are very, very desperate. And I thought that was just such a great way to start.
Yeah, it looks like it stinks, doesn't it?
Yeah,
great job.
Which is brilliant, and because I really enjoyed the fact that smell is obviously, the primary theme of the film. And it's like, well, how do you convey that in a film? How do you deal with the sort of the feelings that smell evokes when you're dealing with the screen? So I thought that would be quite challenging. But with the fish guts, everyone just looks like they're covered in shit. Like you just know, like you get such a feeling of how it would smell. And then again, when we're focusing more on the nicer smells, and obviously when we've got all the roses kind of being, pummeled down into the kind of oils, and you get one moment where Dustin Hoffman's character, he smells something for the first time, and it's like he's gone on this wild LSD trip, and he gets all these wonderful, colourful visions, and a woman comes and kisses him on the cheek. So I think they did a really good job of kind of evoking very, very strong emotions around smell, which I suppose is how the main character is feeling. That is his main thing in life. That is the thing that overrides his senses and his, ambitions, really. It's all to do with smell.
Yeah.
So I thought they did a really good job of that.
I think, sorry, in that opening sequence as well, there's a bit where he's a baby and he's in the children's home and he grabs one of the children's fingers, and his nose sort of searches it out and starts just smelling this kid's scent, and it's straight away it's unnerving, isn't it? Because it's smell, it's one of the senses, but putting that front and center, there's something of the sort of emotional uncanny valley about it, you know, where it just something seems off about it and something's frightening about it.
Just on that scene as well in the orphanage, I think one of the darkest things I've ever seen is orphaned kids trying to suffocate an orphaned baby. I was like, what? Like, we did Butterfly Effect on it a few weeks ago, and I thought that was dark. I was like, this is
that's
next
pretty.
level.
Yeah, we have had a succession of comedians picking dark films. So yeah, but no, you're right, and it's funny because going into this, I'd only seen the opening scene, not because I started watching it and turned it off, but I did it in film studies at college. So people were picking opening scenes and how to like establish a world and all that sort of stuff. And someone picked this, and I've always wanted to go back to it, but just never sought it out. And since then, but you're right, it's such a sensory film. That's what I really like about it. Like the sense of smell and it is the main sense that they use. But the fact that everyone in it, depending on where the film is, you feel like you can smell them. Like it's the most sensory experience I think I've ever had watching a film. So like the people in the poor part of Paris, the slums, the fish market, they look, because they would be, dirty and sort of smelly, and you feel like you can smell and almost taste them. And then when you go to the wealthier part of the town, or when he moves to Grasse, which is in a wealthier part of France, you feel like you can then smell a different smell. It's really strange, and they do that. I think the way they do that by changing things from the colours, you know, very grey and brown in Paris, to green and lots of sort of lovely pastel colours when they're in the richer part of town. I thought it is really interesting, like to achieve that in a film, to make you not only feel something emotionally, but feel something almost literally with your senses.
Yeah.
I thought it was an incredible achievement just on its own.
Get this. So part of it, this kind of feeds into what you're saying, because I'm damned if I can spot this part of the movie. They shot a lot of it in Spain. Part of that movie is made in a skate park. The fucking skate park. Like, I could watch that 1,000 times and never go, oh, that's it. That's the skate park.
I'm going to be thinking about where that is. I got images of like people trying to like do a kickflip in the background of Ben Whishaw scraping fat off a corpse.
Yeah.
But no, it's and they do it as well with the camera work as well. Like you say, the scene where the baby grabs the young boy's finger, it's so visceral, but it's such a simple idea. Everyone knows that image of a baby grabbing a hand or a finger because everyone does it. Like, I've got a baby niece, and the first thing you do is get him to like compare your hands to their hands and go, oh, look how tiny they are. Except they sort of flip it on its head and do it in a bit more of a dark, sort of twisted way.
Yeah. There's I think one of the great movie monsters is obviously the xenomorph from Alien, and I read something once saying that part of the reason it's so unsettling is because it doesn't have eyes. You don't know how it knows you're there, and that's what's scary about it. I think there is that sense with that scene where he's grabbing the finger, that he's unseeing, but he's still completely aware of what's around him in a way that you can't second guess.
Yeah, it's a little bit like they say with A Quiet Place. Like, they can only hear you, so you have to be quiet. Or another sort of movie monster, if you will, like Anthony Hopkins purposely doesn't blink when he's playing Hannibal Lecter.
Oh, right.
So when he is staring at you, it's so unsettling because you're sort of going, like,
yeah. But like, you wouldn't necessarily notice that though, would you? You would just know that something's awry. That's interesting. I love The Quiet Place, and I know there's a second one coming out, but I think they've missed a trick by not doing the Dwight version. We've seen him, but let's visit Shroot Farms for A Quiet Place 2. I want to see what went down there.
I'd pay
He'd
twice.
Be the monster in that, right?
Yeah,
Dwight,
exactly.
it would be you running from Dwight, right? For sure.
Chasing after people with beats. One thing I thought it did a good job as well was it was all quite overpowering and overwhelming when he was in Paris and the slums of Paris. So that idea of sense being the smell being the main sense, it is, when you smell something that's really bad, it is so overpowering. It's sort of all you can feel. And that idea that senses can affect each other, I thought was really interesting, and how they changed it from like when he's in isolation, it feels like he's so isolated because they take the soundscape of a poor part of a city and then they contrast it with when he's in a cave, like you say, and then they contrast it again when he's in grass. So I thought it was really interesting, that sense of overwhelmingness, if you will.
There's a lot going on with the sound as well, like so much, like everything is given a sound effect. I was listening, like every single footstep you get in a sound, and I think that has a lot to do with kind of conveying what he feels about smelling, because you get a lot of the sniffs, and then it's like when he smells something that he likes, you'll get like a little breathlessness and stuff. So there's so much going on visually and audio wise to kind of convey the essence of smells.
Yes, and a lot of squelches.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Like any sort of slightly disgusting sound will be used to unnerve you. And I think, you know, it's a horrible film in a lot of ways. The story is horrible. He's horrible. He's irredeemable. But I think I enjoyed the way it unsettled me, because it did it in a very intelligent way, and it unfolds as it's always going to unfold, as kind of as fairy tales do, I suppose. And there's sort of something morbidly fascinating about that. It reminded me, and this is a you know, a very, very different sort of thing, but there's a book called Hangover Square by Patrick Hamilton, which is a very, very bleak, depressing book. And it's one of those things where it's the main character has a sort of disastrous life, and you can see 2 steps ahead of him. Basically, he's too stupid to see why he's getting into all these troubles. So it makes the book really predictable in a way that you can't put down, which is a strange thing. And it's a similar device here. And I just found that I couldn't look away from it. And I guess in the age of the smartphone, that's kind of better than ever, isn't it? Maybe that's why everyone's so into murder now. Because
so much true crime. But you know, I know what you mean. There's that sense of like when when people slow down for car crashes.
Yeah,
like you can't look away. It's so dark, but there is also a morbid curiosity that everyone has, I suppose, in their own way.
It's quite wacky as well, isn't it? And I don't know if that's the right word to use, but, you know, bodies in vats. And then when he goes on the sort of killing spree and he's killing woman after woman and just leaves them naked out on the street for people to find, like it's just sort of chaotic and a bit crazy. And it's just really interesting to have that alongside this darkness that's going on as well. I really loved the transition as he was moving from Paris into the cave, and then eventually into the sort of, you know, lovely lavender fields and this gorgeous greenery and grasslands. And you sort of get like his metamorphosis almost as well. It's like he started off kind of small-time criminal and then really just kind of went for it after he's kind of come out the cave. Like he come out as a monster and then nobody was safe, and it was just this awful crisis, and you know, the women are dying and we must protect them. But I loved all the naked ladies' bodies just left everywhere. It was so intense, and it was just so much.
Yeah, the sense as well is that from his perspective, he's just putting the bins out. You know, he doesn't need that anymore, you know?
Yeah, just killing another woman, whatever, you know, Tuesday, innit?
Got a scent, so...
Yeah, it's like, it does a really good job, which is also sort of quite eerie considering everything that's happened in the last year or so. It does a really good job of capturing both sort of frenzy and paranoia. So it starts, like you say, it starts slow, and then before you know it, he seems to have killed about 20 women. And then, like, the more he does it, the sort of, not the number you become to it, but you just go, oh, he's killed another one.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, the first one, it's like, that's a person. And Alan Rickman's daughter, that's a person.
Yeah.
But in between, there's like, well, there's just women. Like, and it just becomes this almost frenzied feel to it, which is also sort of concreted by the music. Like that, there's a metronomic like build up, like a that they use all the way through it, and it's really unsettling. But also when he's happy, the music's really quiet, a lot quieter as well. It's a lot more sort of strings and uplifting. Obviously, he's not that happy throughout the film, but you really notice it when they start trying to build tension.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the building of tension works throughout the movie. It's very, very well paced and well scripted, because I think part of exactly what you're talking about, why you almost become numb to the scale of what he's doing by the end, is because effectively, you know, everyone he meets after he leaves them has a horrible time, because you just know wherever he is, chaos follows and misfortune follows, and he's like a walking curse. So the film builds into the crescendo of him just, you know, he's got more of a purpose now. He's got people around him. Of course, that those people are going to suffer. And it's funny, isn't it? Why is that so gripping? Why is it so? It's awful.
It is. It's just, I just think it's a morbid curiosity everybody has. It's like you say, people, it's like they can't look away from bad stuff happening. And I suppose there's much more bad news in the world, certainly at the moment, than good, but you still read it.
Yeah.
It's strange. It's almost like you can't look away, and especially now when we're so flooded with information because we can get it from the palm of our hand in our phone. But it's interesting you say, because I didn't look at my phone a lot, apart from to make the odd note.
Yeah.
But I try not to look at my phone, especially when we're doing it for this. But what can I say? I'm plugged into the Matrix.
Oh yeah, it's hard, isn't it?
Everybody. So, but yeah, what did we think of? Because this is probably the longest we've talked about a film without touching on any acting. So, what did we think of particularly Ben Whishaw's performance? Because he has a lot to do with not a lot of script for him.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't speak a lot, is what I mean.
And that was one of the challenges, obviously, for the filmmakers. And I know I forget the names of the people involved, which is shocking, really. But one of the people that was originally attached to it had an unusual narrative style that they tried to use to get around that. It was decided that it didn't quite work for that. And that style was eventually what became the diving bell and the butterfly. So a lot of people tried very hard to get around this issue of a non-communicative protagonist, I suppose, / antagonist. But I think that they did it well, and I don't know how to explain how they did it. They've hidden it almost.
It's a lot of sort of. It's almost like a mime, isn't it? It's like it's a lot of posture and face and looking. Obviously, the camera does a lot of work, but I mean, Ben Whishaw is a terrific actor, and he's one of these people who seems to be able to do whatever he wants. He's in James Bond, and then he's in this and I'm Not There and David Copperfield and all that sort of thing. So it's interesting because the director, I think it's Tom Tykwer. I only know he did Run Lola Run. He's done this, and I think he did some of Cloud Atlas. I know he's done other stuff, but none of that comes to mind. So it's interesting you say that went on to become another film. It's interesting how films are so collaborative that they take little pieces of ideas and put them together. But what did you think of Ben Wishaw's performance, Atlas?
Oh yeah, fabulous, brilliant. I mean, I didn't like him at all. Exactly. And that's what you want, right? I did find that a bit tricky sometimes when you don't like I didn't really like any of the characters. Like, I wasn't rooting for anyone. You didn't feel like you were on anyone's team. And sometimes with that, you feel like you're not super connected to the film, and maybe you're not quite as engaged. But obviously, you're not meant to like him, and that's a good thing. Really, I really want to talk about the ending, because the ending, it just made me retroactively see the film in a completely different light. Like, I wasn't expecting it at all. I was just thinking, oh, he's going to get strung up, they're going to murder him, and, the end. So for it to end like that, I was just really surprised. And I can't remember the last time I was really surprised by a film. But I just did not see that coming at all.
Yeah, it is a bit of a curveball. Visually, it's incredible. There are 750 people involved in that scene, apparently. Just really, really out of nowhere. And it is, as you say, you think it's going to go one way. The movie directs you in this way the entire way through it. You get this huge curveball. You think, no, surely he's going to be made to pay for everything he's done. And then on top of that, there's another curveball right at the end where he's sort of the master of his own, I suppose, comeuppance.
Yeah, he's completely in control of everything. They sort of turn him from a poor street urchin into almost a god in the space of 2.5 hours. Because, like you say, when the sort of, shall we say, the twist happens, it's about 2 hours in, and it's 2.5 hours, and you're sort of going, well, this can't be. Like, is there loads of credits? And then that happens, and and then that just sort of brings a really strange element to the way it finishes. Good as well, but unexpected, I suppose. Yeah.
So I think I remember in the book that seeming less of a shock, purely because I think that's more to do with the differences in form between a movie and a novel. But as people coming to it not knowing what happened, did that? Because I wonder if there's a danger of that breaking your suspension of disbelief. Did it seem too much, or did it, or I guess, did you enjoy where the story went at that point?
For me, it made me appreciate the film more because it was such a surprise. And you get to a point where you feel like you just aren't surprised that often anymore. It's like even in the films that do have a twist, it's kind of everything's still in keeping with it, and you're like, oh yeah, there were clues that this was going to happen all the way along. And I just didn't see it coming at all, and it just made me reevaluate the whole film. Makes you reconsider the genre as well, which I thought was interesting. And it just reminded me a little bit, some of the scenes, especially because of the amount of bodies that were there, I think, as well. Reminded me a bit of Mother. Have you seen that with Jennifer Lawrence? Kind of towards the end. Oh, okay. But it's just, it's all, it's all a bit much, and there's loads of people, and it's quite frenzied, and it's just a bit crazy. And I just really appreciated that, I think, because I wasn't really sure if I liked the film. Like, as it was going on, I was like, am I enjoying this? Like, who is this for? Like, do I like these characters? Like, and I would just kind of, I guess I didn't really connect with it. And then that happened, and I was like, oh, cool, nice, surprise,
Yeah.
It's like that fairy tale you were talking about, Jim. It's like the fairy tale element, except it's for, well, shall we say grown-ups?
Yes.
I did like it. It's always difficult because I liked the really surreal and fantastical element of it. It was sort of like, I like a film that makes you feel something, that sort of makes you go, what? Like in that, a bit like a few months ago we did Lost Highway, and if you've not seen that, literally halfway through, it just completely changes to almost a different film.
Yeah.
And so I like that. It's difficult to criticize any elements of plot in a film that's such a faithful adaptation, because you can't say anything, because it's like being like, well, Snape had never killed Dumbledore, would he? And then it's like, well, he does in the book, so that's why they've done it in the film. So
yeah,
spoilers for Harry Potter if you've not seen that. But I did enjoy it, because I think what I like about it is then they then go on after the big scene to almost a coda, which is the scene you're talking about, where he takes control of his own destiny. And that I found really interesting. That it moves from fairy tale into Greek tragedy, that sort of Oedipus type, well, it was never going to work, so here we go.
Yeah, kind of, it circles back in on itself. And it's... there is, I guess that's where that sense of inevitability is satisfied, really, isn't it, in that final scene.
So we'll move on, I suppose, to things we kind of didn't like about the film. I'll come to you first, Alice. Was there anything that you particularly didn't like about the film?
I thought there was some elements of the script that were quite weak. I felt like a lot of the dialogue didn't feel like real conversation, and so it just really felt like it just reminded you that you're watching something that has been scripted. But of course, because it was so surreal, it's not meant to feel natural. What I don't understand why Dustin Hoffman was doing an accent and nobody else was.
Yes.
I thought that was a bit odd. Everyone else was a Cockney living in France, and then he came out with this like Italian accent. I was like, oh, that's a bit weird, and it wasn't the best Italian accent either. So I found that a little bit distracting. The moment where he commits his first murder with the girl that he's following around the alleyways, I wasn't really sure how to feel about that. Like it felt like he just put his hand on her mouth for 30 seconds and then she was dead, and I was like, huh. And I just sort of I didn't really buy it, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I would agree on that. I think it was one of those very silly movie deaths, wasn't it? And also I suppose the part of the lens through which women are seen in the movie is that they are very delicate and dainty and almost like flowers, but literally in the sense that they're being pressed in some cases, and that's perhaps a little bit. It serves the plot in a way that doesn't necessarily reference reality. But yeah, I thought that as well. And I completely agree with you about Dustin Hoffman's accent as well. But I guess, he can't sound American. So I guess he had to do an Italian accent. But did he do an Italian accent? It was just like vaguely, broadly European, wasn't it? A bit.
Yeah. I'm not too sure what it was. And I suppose what you say there about the women being like dainty little flowers, and I suppose it was a way for him to kill her without leaving a mark. Like he didn't, it wasn't a throat slitting and there was blood everywhere. He didn't strangle her or beat her to death or anything. It was just this very sort of this delicate little hand on the mouth, and then she's dead.
Yeah,
but
I think isn't the idea that he's accidentally smothered her?
I think so. I thought that.
I'm sure there's a lot of ways to kill people, but an accidental smothering does seem an unlikely occurrence to me. I don't know.
unless it's that film trope where apparently if you just sort of move someone's chin to one side, you break their neck, which is what they do in a lot of action films.
Yeah, or you shoot someone once from a distance and they fall over and are immediately stone dead.
Yeah.
But I know, would you say there was an element, particularly for yourself, Alice, of there's an element of the male gaze through the film a little bit? Because that's something I kind of noticed, and I watched this with my other half, and she did mention that a little bit, again, trying not to spoil the ending, but the big scene that we're discussing, she sort of said, well, basically she was like, there's a lot of tits there, but where there's no blokes kissing, but there's a lot of women kissing. So if it's meant to be this mad frenzied, everyone sort of just loses it, why is it only what I suppose a heterosexual man would want to see? And I think that's an interesting point.
It's just sort of standard, really, isn't it? But it didn't feel any more male gazing than like most other films.
No, any Bond film.
Yeah, well, exactly. And because his main thing is the scent, it's not really the look of them. Even though there were sort of moments where he seems to be, quite sort of turned on by what he's smelling. So I didn't really feel it that much. And because he's quite not gross, but I guess he is, like, he isn't the hero. So it's like you're not thinking that, oh yeah, this is how men of the world are supposed to see women and treat women or whatever. It's like he's just a bad guy and you don't like him. So I didn't really feel like it didn't bother me. Not as much as some other films, for sure.
Was it? What about you, James? Is there anything you sort of, apart from what we've already touched on, anything you're like, I'm not sure about that, or I'd change this?
Yeah, I think we have largely covered it. I think there's a very absolutely crucial and fair point about the scene that we're trying not to describe. Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair criticism of it, and the male gaze is obvious and present throughout, isn't it? And also, I think a lot of, and I don't know whether Patrick Suskind was deliberately doing this because it would have been how the world would have been at the time, or whether it's an oversight of himself. A lot of the way that women are protected in the movie is almost as if they are relevant in relation to the men in their lives, effectively.
Yeah.
Rather than being, independent people who are very invested in not being murdered themselves, which I would imagine they would be. So I think that is perhaps a problem. But yeah, other than that, I think we've covered the flaws that I can think. Maybe a little bit long, but I think it's possibly justified if you're adapting something so faithfully.
I agree with you there on both counts. I do think it's sort of understandable if you're adapting something, especially if you really want to get the essence of the book right, because you don't want to miss anything out. If you look at, again, and this is just the first one that comes to mind, but there's a reason why a lot of people say Goblet of Fire is the weakest Harry Potter film, because it comes from one of the strongest books where they cut loads and loads out, because it's such a huge book. It would be two films like the last one are, except you can't really be like 1, 2, 3 and then 2 4s and then a 5. It's a bit strange. So, but for me, it's not necessarily the length. It's more I think there's a little bit of odd pacing. I think it starts really well, gets you into the world, and then I don't know when, maybe about an hour just before he starts the frenzied sort of killings, it drops a little bit. And what I noticed was there's a lot of narration, which is brilliant, by the way. John Hurt just has this fantastic silken voice. Then that disappears for a little bit, and then it comes back. And I think there's just an element of, perhaps because that's been in it and so present, you lose a little bit of your grip on the film. But maybe that's supposed to be on purpose because he's losing his grip. I'm not sure. But there was, some sort of pacing issues for me a little bit, but nothing. It didn't ruin the film. It was just like something I noticed. The other thing was, it's really interesting that we've talked a lot about how you're supposed to feel about Grenouille, because for me, you've both been very like, he's horrible, he's this and he's that. And I was sort of at points like, I'm not 100% sure how I'm supposed to feel about him. And that's not that I think it's all right to kill women, but I didn't know if in a way you were supposed to feel sorry for him, as if he just didn't know any better.
Yeah, I think, is there an element that because he is entirely motivated by scent and capturing scent, that there's a sort of sad loneliness to him?
Yeah,
in that
there's a
there's no one
vulnerability,
who
isn't
could,
there?
there's no one else on earth like him. There's no one else on earth who has the same drives and motivations of him. So I don't know if you're not supposed to like him, are you? But I think you're supposed to understand the tragedy of him and
Yeah.
perhaps, recognize the tragedy of him.
Yeah, I
And it
suppose.
is indeed tragic as well, isn't it? Like
Mm.
his start in life is just awful. And for the first, however, like 18, 20 years, everything is just awful for him.
And he's a tragedy, not just for himself, but for everyone he meets.
Mm. One thing I did notice that you just reminded me of then. So when Alan Rickman sort of gets wind that he wants to kill his daughter, so he sort of takes her away, and they ride the horses like to the next town over, and he's sort of trying to hide her away, and he locks her away in this room, but then just leaves her.
Yeah.
And I was like, you'd hire a bodyguard. Because he's like some sort of like wealthy like aristocrat or something, isn't he? So it's like, so he's probably got enough cash. Hire a few bodyguards or stay in that room with her. But he just left her in there, and I was like, oh well, of course she's gonna get killed now.
Yeah, it's not that weird to sleep in the room with your daughter if she's possibly being hunted by a maniac.
Exactly. Yeah. Just so unbelievable.
That's the most unbelievable part. Not the super nose, not the fact that he seems to be able to run fast enough to catch up with a horse at one point.
Yeah. Yeah.
What what did you sort of think for yourself, Jim? Did you think is there a message from the film, or is it just sort of there to entertain?
That's I've been thinking a lot about that, because it is. It makes it very clear that you shouldn't go around trying to capture the essence of women, resulting in their death. But it's hard. It's a film with an unusual kind of lack of a message. I think it really does lean into the kind of the fairy tale, grim tale idea of it, and I think actually that's what's quite unique about it, in that it is just an unfolding tragedy, an unfolding sad tale of horror, really. A sort of, as I kind of said earlier on, it is like a folk tale, really, a folk horror tale. So I suppose the message is it's one of kind of isolation, isn't it? It's a character study in somebody who is a complete loner. There is a point in the book where he thinks about why he's doing the things that he does, and he concludes that it's just because he's evil, and he's fine with it. So it is, it's not a particularly nuanced look at the kind of outsider in society in a lot of senses, which he obviously acts as in the story. But I'm still unpacking what I'm supposed to take away from it. I already know not to go around murdering people, so maybe I don't need to overthink.
It's up there with the top rule, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one of the main things.
What about you, Alice? Did you think there was a message to it at all?
I didn't feel like there was, and I feel like that's why sort of before the ending happened, I was just kind of feeling like do I like this film? Like, I don't really know. I'm not really feeling it, and so I don't really think there was a message. I think it was just, I don't know. It was just really interesting. It's certainly one of the more interesting films I've seen because it left me thinking, huh.
That's something I really liked about it. Like, I like it when a film stays with you. I like leaving a film and being like, yeah but what about this? Like, I know we've already mentioned it, but like, that's what Lost Highway, like, I didn't enjoy all of the film, but I like that I went away being like, yeah, but what about this? It's better than it being sort of a disposable, well, that was fine.
I love that when you only realise 2 days later that you loved the movie.
Yeah, it stays with you. You can't stop thinking, like, lying in bed being like, yeah, but how many women did he kill? Like, what did it smell like? Where did you first sort of watch this, Jim? Did you go to the cinema to watch it, or
no? I watched it. It was on my Amazon list for ages, and then it popped up as being available for free. So I was like, right, get on that. Because I think a lot of people have the movie in that position of like meaning to get around to watching it.
Yeah.
And that was certainly where it was for me. And so, yeah, I if you've been considering it, then I hope we swayed you one way or another. But yeah,
what genre would you say it is?
I guess a sort of historical thriller. I think there is an argument that adaptations are a genre of their own, because a lot of movies that are quite hard to categorize are exactly hard to categorize because they've been adapted from a different format. yeah, I think is it a thriller? I suppose it's weird because it is. It's called Perfume, as the story of a murderer. So, which is a spoiler, I guess, isn't it? So it is. It is. It's almost. I think, in a sense, if you like the movie Seven, you will feel completely at home watching this, even though they couldn't be more different. And I suppose it's unusual that it's told like exclusively from his perspective as well. Perhaps exclusively. I guess you see quite a bit of Alan Rickman's character's motivation as well. Yeah, I guess historical thriller.
It reminded me a little bit of Sweeney Todd at times without the music.
It's the sort of period of time as well where everyone's sort of got makeup and wigs on, except they're all dirty and grimy. So
yeah,
it's a bit like you could say the same thing for certain, in no way in terms of the quality, but certain elements of like Pirates of the Caribbean, like when like that, everyone's got the curly wigs on and they've got the sort of how you think of the King Louis makeup and the sort of shoes and everything, because the actual Grenouille doesn't actually get that until the end. He sort of wears scruffy rags all the way through, and at the end they kind of make him look a little bit like Buttons from pantomime.
Yeah,
but but I think they do that on purpose, because that's when he emerges as this sort of a angel, this god, this Leviathan, whatever you want to call it, and that's why it's so contrasting when he's dressed like that.
It's a culmination of his power, I suppose. Isn't
Yeah,
it? Or sort of his manifestation of it.
It's him being Superman flying for the first time, except he's killed 20 women.
Yeah, the idea of him of Buttons is. I feel like I'm probably going to have a nightmare at some point when I'm watching a pantomime and he is Buttons.
I went to watch a panto. Is it any good? Yeah, there was this weird bit though where the narrator murdered 20 women. Oh right, okay.
Why do you do that? To make a perfume? What? Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it was. How much did you pay to get for that? Yeah, it was expensive.
Yeah, God, let me tell you about the end. Whoa.
One of the questions I always think about, especially when we have guests on, and I don't think I've ever actually asked it before, but I always write it before we even watch the film. It just says pitch a sequel. Now, I'm not sure you could do a Perfume 2. I mean, they did try an American Psycho 2.
They did, yeah. I think you could argue that. I suppose you've got to go for a different sense, haven't you? Could you argue that the Ben Affleck Daredevil is
someone who is obsessed with taste and making like the perfect omelette or something?
Yeah, yeah. I guess Soylent Green, I suppose.
The question I was interested to know. So I haven't actually mentioned this so far, but we've got 2 Arsenal fans. Yeah, Alice is an Arsenal fan. You're an Arsenal fan, hence the sadness in your eyes. Which Arsenal player smells the best, do you think? You can choose anyone from history. No, anyone.
Oh, probably. I always thought Mark Overmars probably smelt nice, and Freddie Lundberg as well. Actually, he looks like he takes care of himself.
I was going to say Robert Pires, but I think Freddie Lundberg surely smells amazing.
Imagine
Patrick Vieira.
Imagine what that dressing room smelt like in the Invincible season.
Yeah. It must have been. I don't know. You got Martin Keown in there as well.
That's true. Yeah. It could have been like the end of the film if it smelled anything like the form in that season.
I imagine that's just what Freddie Lundberg's life is like. Just probably a curse at this point.
Just tired all the time.
Yeah, just exhausted.
So we'll move on to talking about the critical reception then, to sort of get an idea of if we think it is underrated. So, Alice, you've probably not seen the critical reception, have you?
No, I tried to avoid it.
Okay.
If I was I feel like if I was gonna put a number on it, I probably would give it around the 7 mark, maybe like 7.1, 7.2, and I feel like that's probably what it got. Like I didn't think it was amazing. I don't think I liked it as much as you did, Jim. But there was a lot to like about it, I thought. And I feel like the sort of around the 7 mark it would sit. But Jim, what would you give it? Would you score this one quite high, do you think? Like, if you think about other films that you love as well, where does this sit?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm generally quite generous with things like this. I tend to like a lot of stuff. And also I think it's difficult for me to uncouple it from the book because it is a faithful adaptation of the book. And I really love the book. And also even Scentless Apprentice by Nirvana is named after this book, or is about this, or about the book. So, and I love that as well. So it's all over the place. So I probably would, it's not, I don't think it's in. I don't know if it would make my top 10. No, it wouldn't make my top 10 of movies, I wouldn't think. But I would probably give it about an 8 because that's the sort of generous scorer that I am.
So you both sort of, if you even it out, you're probably fairly accurate between you. So on IMDb at the time of recording, it gets 7.5. Rotten Tomatoes, the audience give it 74%, but the critics score gives it 59%. So
Ooh.
yeah, I was quite interested to see what you thought of that, because for me, if the difference between the audience and the critics, again, which we've talked about before, shows how the critics don't always know how to say stuff about films, and sometimes they'll try and find stuff to say when it's not there. But I would say 59% is pretty. That's too low for me. That's
I would
too
agree.
harsh.
I would say that's a little bit harsh. What were some of their criticisms? Do you know?
Well, so I got it, and it's like we've said before. It's just they're either trying to get a pun in, or they've thought of the title and then they've thought, well, I'll just reverse engineer the title into what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
one of them just says, "Scratch and Sniff Cinema." What did you think? What did you think of the film? That's just a title.
That doesn't mean anything, does
That's
it?
just, yeah. That's like being like, Batman. What? Yeah, Batman was in it. Like, too many bats. I don't know. But more sort of serious reviews said things like it sort of established itself really well, then tails off a little bit. It's there's a weird one here that says that it's an ultimately an unmistakable failure. There's a strange majesty to its epic overreaching, which I don't really know. What is that saying? Is it saying that it's got ideas above its...
Unmistakable failure? My goodness, that's harsh.
Yeah.
But there's a strange majesty to its epic overreaching. So is it sort of saying it's trying to do too much? Because it's not Star Wars, is it? Do you know what I mean? Like, what?
If you don't buy into the concept or the premise, then it's probably, and if it's for whatever reason not for you, then I can imagine it probably isn't the best watch. But I think they did a good job of suspending that disbelief. Whenever I read a review of anything, I have to wonder about the state of mind of the person who wrote it at the time, because it does make a difference to your enjoyment of it. So I watched 12 Years a Slave hungover. The logic being, I feel terrible anyway. I know watching this is going to make me feel terrible. I might as well get it out of the way. And let me tell you, that was a mistake. And I don't know, maybe this person was hungover when they watched the movie, and of course you'd probably hate it. It's awful. It's horrible. It's not a fun time, is it?
Yeah, I can imagine you probably start questioning how much you did have to drink at the end as well.
Yeah.
But there's another one here that sort of says the director stays true to the source novel, but it only works on the page. His faithfulness betrays him. I mean, that's a strange thing to say. How could your faithfulness betray you? It's not.
Yeah, I guess you could spend too much time trying to be faithful to the book, maybe, and then make the film kind of cold as a result. But I don't know. I feel they succeeded in that, as we've established.
I agree. So, right, decision time then, Alice. Is it underrated based on what we've seen and heard?
If we were going off the critical score, I would say definitely underrated. But I feel like the IMDb, the audience score, that's about right for me. So it depends which one you want to take from that. What did you think, Josh?
I would say let's go off I would always choose the baseline of the critics.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say it is underrated. And I think I overall enjoyed it. It certainly stayed with me, but for the fact that they managed to achieve this sensory experience of smelling and tasting and seeing everything that you see, and the fact that it was almost like it was so immersive in that way. I'm in awe of anyone who can do that by putting something on a screen. So for that alone, I think it's underrated and quite the achievement, really.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll put that one in the underrated pile as well.
There we go, Jim. I'm guessing you've not changed your mind. I'm guessing.
No, still a fan. Still, yeah. And again, I wouldn't. It's not like it's hugely underrated, because, like I say, it's adapted from a very, very famous book, and it had it made money. It was a big budget movie. It has some very famous people in it, but I'm surprised it isn't better known.
So, Jim, thanks very much for coming on. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed rewatching Perfume and talking about it. Certainly experience. Anything you want us to look out for?
Yeah, so I obviously, not obviously, I don't know what you know about my life. I am one of the members of a football podcast called the Football Ramble. You can find us all over the internet, and as well as that, because there's no stand-up to do anymore, and I need something to keep me busy, I also have a YouTube channel called We Like Old Adverts. It's exactly what it sounds like. We just find old adverts from the past, look at them, critique them, laugh at them, and some of them are fucking mental. And we're just never going to run out of really, really mad, weird ones. We've learned we could do this for 1,000 years. We'll never run out of surprising and strange, weird adverts. So yeah, you can find that on YouTube and on Facebook.
What's the sort of oldest one you've found? I'm interested to know, like how far back have you gone?
We actually went back to the first advert broadcast on American TV, which we haven't actually covered yet because it's for a watch company, and it's just a globe spinning around with a watch company's name on it, so it's not particularly interesting. But I think the 50s at this point are probably the furthest back we've gone, but we have plans to go a bit further back than that. We actually did cover the first ever advert on UK TV, which was for toothpaste, and it just nothing has changed. It's like the beats are so similar to adverts that you would have for toothpaste now. It's quite amazing, really.
What's your favourite advert you've ever seen?
What's my favourite advert I've ever seen? Oh, that is
Vavavoom.
Thierry. Yeah, maybe that alone, because he's like a superhero to me. I don't know about you, Alice, but
of course. My brother met him once. He lost his mind. So I love the tango adverts.
Yeah, they were fun.
You've been tangoed. I thought they were quite funny.
Yeah, there's one of them that almost predicted Brexit, which was for the blackcurrant tango one, which was a guy getting a letter from a French exchange student who didn't like the taste of it, and he gradually just he walks out of the office all the way to the White Cliffs of Dover into a boxing ring, offers out all of France, and then 2 Spitfires appear above him. It's quite sad now when you look at how the world played out, but it was funny at the time. Yeah, it's like I should really have a favorite advert, I think, but there are just so many mad ones to choose from, and quite often it's the more insensitive, the more I like it. The more it's like the more it shows how much the world has moved on, the better. There's one for Tab Clear, and it's just so chauvinistic and sexist that it's just funny to me that was ever considered reasonable. There's a song in it. It just keeps. It's for Tab Clear, and it's something like, "Don't you want to be a good shape? He wants you in a good shape. Be a mind sticker." And it keeps coming back to this idea that this phrase "mind sticker," as if like when people are living their lives, they should want to stick in someone else's mind. It's like it's very much stop trying to make fetch happen. It's like it's just not a thing. Mind sticker isn't a thing. It's not anything anyone says. So yeah, that one. It's not my favourite advert, but it made us laugh a lot.
And so that's on YouTube.
Yes,
excellent. We will put a link out there for when we release the episode, so everyone can listen to it. But I watched a couple myself, so I would very much recommend it, because it's not only is it sort of quite nostalgic, but like you say, it's a hilarious look at how things have changed in not that much time when you actually think about it, I suppose. So Jim, thank you very much for joining us.
No worries. Thanks. Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
So there we go. Another one for the underrated pile. Thanks very much for Jim for coming on. You should definitely check out We Like Old Adverts and the Football Ramble as well. Are 2 absolutely brilliant YouTube channels / podcasts. They're well worth a look. If you'd like to get in touch with us and recommend a film, then we'd absolutely love to hear from you. It's filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. Other than that, all that remains to say is we will have another episode next week. Alice Oliver, thank you very much for joining me as ever.
Josh Hallam, pleasure as always.
And it's goodbye from me. Cheerio.
Bye.